Why I remain deeply bullish on MSTR as 2025 comes to a close. This has been an unbelievable year, and what I'm about to say isn't just about the next few months. I'm talking about why I'm bullish on this stock for 2026, and honestly, for as long as this system continues to function the way it does. And I want to be very clear right from the start. This has nothing to do with charts, Greek letters, technical indicators, or some guy on Bloomberg who has never had dirt under his fingernails lecturing people about risk. If you're watching this and you've ever worked a real job, and I don't mean a polished LinkedIn resume job, I mean a job where the building smells strange, the floor is always slightly sticky, and the schedule changes with no warning, then here's something you might not realize. You already understand risk better than 90% of Wall Street. You didn't learn risk in a classroom. You learned it when your rent jumped 30% overnight. You learned it when your grocery bill doubled, but your paycheck didn't. You learned it when your kid needed braces and your boss told you your hours were getting cut. You learned it when the factory shut down, the store closed, or your full-time job quietly became part-time forever. That is real risk. Permanent risk. The kind of risk with no rewind button. Now contrast that with the people who call Bitcoin and MSTR too risky. These people live in a world where mistakes get buried in reports. Bonuses still get paid. The worst outcome is an awkward HR meeting followed by a new job title 6 months later. To them, risk is a line on a spreadsheet. But you know risk is waking up at 3 in the morning staring at the ceiling, doing math you never wanted to learn just to see if next month is survivable. And this is the disconnect. There are people in this world, operators, people who manage profit and loss, who have had to make payroll, manage inventory, or simply survive month to month. They learn a few things very quickly. Cash loses value. Time works against you. Prices move whether you're ready or not. And quietly waiting while everything gets more expensive is not safety. It's slow death. So, when Michael Saylor looks at Bitcoin in 2020 and says, "I don't want my savings slowly eaten alive," that sounds insane to people whose lives are insulated from consequences. But to you, it sounds obvious because you've already lived the alternative. You've lived in a country where wages lag, costs surge, and every year you're told everything is stable while life keeps getting harder. You've watched the American dream shrink-wrapped, slapped on a credit card, and sold back to you with interest. So when Wall Street analysts look at MSTR and say it's volatile, what they really mean is this doesn't fit the model they built for a world that no longer exists. There is a massive difference between volatility and ruin. Volatility is numbers moving around. Ruin is never catching up. And the people who understand this fastest are the people closest to reality. The ones who don't have the luxury of pretending the system is fine, because pretending pays the bills. That's why MSTR makes sense to operators, builders, and working people long before it ever makes sense to spreadsheet analysts. If you've lived through the last 20 years and still trust the old playbook, I don't know what to tell you. But if you've felt the squeeze, watched the decay, and realized something is fundamentally broken, then this story is already speaking your language. And that's why I'm bullish, because we're positioned before everyone else gets it. Now let's get something straight. If you've ever been responsible for keeping something alive, a business, a crew, a family, or even just your household, you already understand risk better than most finance professionals ever will. You've seen what happens when timing is off by 6 months, when cash dries up at the wrong moment, when costs rise first and wages show up later or never. That experience permanently rewires your brain. And that's why MSTR is so polarizing. There's a deep epistemic divide here. Half the population thinks it's a Ponzi scheme on the brink of collapse. The other half thinks it could become the most valuable company in the world. The people calling it reckless usually live inside systems where mistakes are soft, reversible, and quietly ignored. They learn risk in PowerPoint. We learn it when the schedule gets cut, but the bills don't. That's why operators see MSTR differently. When you've signed paychecks, or lived off one, you stop caring about elegant, discounted cash flow models. You care about what keeps the lights on 6 months from now. You learn that liquidity is oxygen. Waiting can be lethal. Holding cash while prices rise is a gamble, even if nobody else calls it one. The professional class was trained to believe stability is the default. Their models assume tomorrow looks like yesterday, but you've watched the rules change in real time. Jobs got worse while headlines got better. Quality collapsed while prices soared. Temporary inflation turned into permanent excuses. So when someone says just sit tight, if you've lived inside consequence, you don't hear reassurance, you hear delay. Bitcoin clicks faster for operators because it speaks directly to risks we already know are real: currency debasement, time pressure, and the cost of standing still. To the credentialed class, those risks are theoretical. To us, they're familiar, and that gap is where the anger comes from. Because people who've never faced real downside call adaptation reckless, but we're not reckless, we're adaptive. We're just adjusting to reality faster than institutions. And once you see that, something uncomfortable becomes obvious. Much of what passes for risk management today is just permission to pretend nothing is wrong. People closest to reality never had that luxury. MBA and CFA finance is built for closed systems. Same currency, same assumptions, same referees. It works until something fundamental breaks. And for a long time, nothing had to break. Wages roughly tracked productivity. Money mostly worked. The biggest risk was underperforming a benchmark and getting yelled at in a conference room with bad carpet. So they optimized for career survival, comparability, herd behavior, lose slowly with everyone else, and you're prudent. Act early and look weird, like Sailor, and you're reckless. That incentive structure trains blindness. Currency debasement becomes background noise. Time is assumed abundant. The unit of account is treated as stable until it isn't. Working people didn't need a white paper to notice something broke. They felt it. Groceries became a math problem. Rent stopped being negotiable. Full-time jobs became apps. While professionals kept modeling, everyone else adjusted their lives. Bitcoin breaks spreadsheets because it questions the base layer. And that terrifies people whose careers depend on that layer being unquestioned. So they dismiss it, call it volatile, call it a Ponzi, reduce it to a trade instead of admitting it's one of the best performing equities of the last 5 years. This isn't academic, it's about incentives. People paid to defend the model will defend it. People forced to live under it will look for exits. And this entire argument collapses into one misunderstanding: volatility versus ruin. Volatility flashes red on screens. Ruin creeps into your life quietly. Volatility is gas jumping 30 cents. Ruin is it never coming back down. Volatility is changing hours. Ruin is full-time disappearing. Volatility is a bad quarter. Ruin is your savings buying less every year. Traditional finance obsesses over volatility because it's measurable, defensible. Ruin implicates the system, so they blur the two. But the most stable thing in your life has been the steady decline of purchasing power. That's not volatility, that's slow destruction. Bitcoin refuses to play along. To insulated lives, that looks reckless. To people who watch their parents work harder and get poorer, it looks like self-defense. MSTR scares people for the same reason. It treats the unit of account as the threat. If you've lived paycheck to paycheck, you know doing nothing is still a decision. Waiting politely while costs rise is a losing bet. When Wall Street screams volatility, what they really mean is this makes our charts uncomfortable. We've lived through ruin for decades. Bitcoin feels corrective. It refuses to accept being the designated loser in a game we never agreed to. Analysts sweat because their tools can't handle unstable money. DCF breaks, balance sheets break, quarterly optics collapse when survival matters. MSTR will always look insane if you believe money is stable and time is abundant. It looks obvious if you know money decays and hesitation is punished. Long-term purchasing power is the objective. Everything else is noise. Leverage scares them too. But working people know leverage can be defensive. Buying a house before prices run. Locking costs today, pulling pain forward to avoid worse pain later. Used to escape decay, leverage protects. Sailor isn't playing quarterly games. This is multi-decade thinking. Infinite duration assets in a system that prints relentlessly. Their models fail because they were designed to make decay look respectable. There will never be consensus, and that's fine. I get better opportunities when people fear what they don't understand. There are two ways to view capital: as something to smooth and justify within a system, or as something alive that must survive pressure. If you grew up working class, you know which one is real. So when institutions ask why anyone would buy this, what they're really asking is why anyone would stop playing by rules that protect them. MSTR forces a brutal question. Are you optimizing to look sane inside a system eating people alive, or to preserve purchasing power through time? Bitcoin doesn't reward explanations. It rewards honesty about risk. MSTR isn't a bet on charts. It's a bet that decay is real, time is hostile, and pretending otherwise has already wiped out millions. If you've lived this squeeze, this isn't radical, it's rational. And that's the divide. Reality never asks for consensus, it settles accounts. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice, investment advice, or a recommendation to buy or sell any security, because all investing involves risk, and you should always conduct your own research or consult